This clip was at an event I did in Middlesbrough in 2018, and you might see current events in what I said. Where they wanted to lead, if we let them, as I've been saying and writing since the 1990s, is World War III. They always plan 3 world wars. And what they want to do is play off NATO against Russia, China, and allies like Iran. And that's what this is all about, this insane demonization of Russia that goes on day after day after day. They're seeking to soften up global public opinion, Western public opinion, to accept a war. This is why you're having this massive NATO buildup of arms and troops on the borders of countries that border Russia.
Next, leaders from NATO countries met in Poland today to finalize plans to beef up the military alliance. For the first time since the Cold War, multinational troops will continuously rotate through 4 countries in Eastern Europe.
Russia has called this buildup a provocation. Is this a provocation?
I would view it as a deterrent. And if I was looking at it through the lens of a potential aggressor, I would say it's an exceptionally capable deterrent.
You've got all these troops, American troops, British troops, that think they're fighting for their country, where what they're doing is fighting for that force which is destroying their country and is aimed to create a nightmare world for their kids and their grandkids.
On the news. And Nigel Farage, who lots of people are painting as the latest, alternative hero, along with all the others like Millet and others that have gone on to not be heroes. But he's actually said something that everyone with a brain cell thinks and understands, to do with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And obviously, he's had a lot of abuse back from the system for not towing the party line. What's your take on this story? Yeah, I mean, this is a classic in terms of politics, where there is a mainstream party line, and if you deviate from it, then you're some kind of demon, when actually what's being said is painfully bloody obvious from the evidence. But what I would say in terms of Nigel Farage, before we get into that, is, as with every other politician, take what they say on each individual subject. So it's like, yeah, okay, what he's saying about illegal immigration, what he's saying about Ukraine, and what he's saying about net zero, good. But let's not forget that he wanted Tony Blair to oversee the COVID story in completeness, and now is saying, oh no, it's terrible what happened. Well, okay, it's all right to be wise after the event when things come along and show you that actually what you were saying was not correct. But you still had the opportunity to challenge a massive imposition on human freedom in this country in the COVID era with the lockdowns and the vaccine. And you didn't. So I hear what you, that's the other thing. I hear what you say, and some of it, okay, but I want to see what you're going to do with it. I'm going to see where you go from here, because as we'll go on to talk about, there's a lot of these alternative heroes who suddenly turned out to be anything but. And, people have said to me, oh, you should be promoting Nigel Farage. It's not the alternative media's job to promote a politician. It's not the media's job in general, really, is it?
No, it's not. It's to call out the system which uses politicians as pawns to advance its agenda. And each party will advance it quicker or slower, but they all advance it in the end. I mean, in terms of this election, you've got an extreme example of a cult-owned politician and party in Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. But they're all system parties in general, and they just push towards that
outcome quicker or slower than each other. But what Farage said about Ukraine and how the Russians were pressured into eventually reacting and invading Ukraine is painfully obvious. Before we get into that, let's see what the furore is all about with what Farage said.
And who you said was the statesman you most admire.
Well, I said
Vladimir Putin.
Hold a second. I said I disliked him.
But you said you admired him.
I said I disliked him.
But you admired him.
As a person, but admired him as a political operator, because he's managed to take control of running Russia.
When Vladimir Putin sent his troops across the border in 22, you blamed the West, not him. You said, I'll just read it to you and then you can react, that on a tweet, it was a consequence of EU and NATO expansion. Yes. Is that a judgment you stand by?
Right. I'll tell you what you don't know. I stood up in the European Parliament in 2014 and I said, and I quote, there will be a war in Ukraine. Why did I say that? It was obvious to me that the ever eastward expansion of NATO and the European Union was giving this man a reason to his Russian people to say they're coming for us again and to go to war.
But you were echoing him.
Sorry?
You were echoing him. That's what Putin says.
No. Sorry, I've been saying this actually since the 1990s. Ever since the fall of the wall. But hang on a second. We've provoked this war. It's, of course it's his fault. He's used what we've done as an excuse. But we provoked the
invasion of Ukraine.
Yes, very interestingly, once again, 10 years ago when I predicted this, by the way, I'm the only person in British politics that predicted what would happen. And of course, everyone said I was a pariah for daring to suggest it. George Robertson, former Labour cabinet minister, who went on to become the Secretary General of NATO, has in the last couple of weeks said the war is a direct result of EU expansion.
But I'm asking you about because it's your judgment and you want to be Prime Minister. Let me ask you someone else.
My judgment has been way ahead of everybody else's in understanding this.
What he said there is perfectly logical. You've only got to look at the maps of the NATO expansion of where it began to where it is now to see it's getting closer and closer and closer to the Russian border. And surely, people will call this an idealistic look, but surely if the idea is global peace, why isn't Russia invited to be a part of it, for example? It was clearly built as a front to go against them. So, of course, they're going to want to push back against that at some point. You keep slapping someone in the face, eventually they're going to retaliate. And the fact that peace is never mentioned, and he dares to mention negotiating and all of that in that clip, just it tells everyone what the outcome they want is, and that's a conflict.
Well, you see that again and again. You saw it in the wars in the Middle East. They were never talking about peace or getting round the table to sort it out, because peace was not what they wanted. They wanted war. They wanted conflict, because conflict changes the nature of human society. Yeah. If you want to change the nature of a world society, then you want a world war, because the world will never be the same again. And of course, I've been saying since the 1990s that the plan was for a third world war, and that it would involve the West at war with the East, basically China, Russia, and other countries thrown in, like Iran. What Farage is saying here, and to be fair, he's been pointing out for a while, is simply the evidence before your eyes. If you don't want to antagonize Russia, then don't keep pushing NATO forces closer and closer to the Russian border, and don't then start saying we're going to encompass Ukraine into NATO, our military quote alliance, and we're not going to, or we're going to encompass Ukraine into the European Union. Because obviously the Russians are going to go, well, hold on a minute, this is not looking good. And so they've been pushing and pushing and pushing, and eventually Putin reacted. But then again, you can go to another level beyond that, in which actually they're working through both sides. But at the level of countries, you've had a reaction from Putin for whatever reason. He was certainly the way he acted and reacted was exactly what the NATO people wanted.
Yeah.
And I've been saying since the 1990s that the plan was for a third world war, and that for a long time that they were pushing towards the Russian border specifically to pressure and trigger Putin to do what he's done.
Yep.
And here's a clip from a film, a story of my life called Renegade, which came out in 2019. But this clip was at an event I did in Middlesbrough in 2018. And you might see current events in what I said. Where they wanted to lead, if we let them, as I've been saying and writing since the 1990s, is World War III. They always plan 3 world wars. And what they want to do is play off NATO against Russia, China, and allies like Iran. And that's what this is all about. This insane demonization of Russia that goes on day after day after day. They're seeking to soften up global public opinion, Western public opinion, to accept a war. This is why you're having this massive NATO buildup of arms and troops on the borders of countries that border Russia.
Next, leaders from NATO countries met in Poland today to finalize plans to beef up the military alliance. For the first time since the Cold War, multinational troops will continuously rotate through 4 countries in Eastern Europe.
Russia has called this buildup a provocation. Is this a provocation?
I would view it as a deterrent. And if I was looking at it through the lens of a potential aggressor, I would say it's an exceptionally capable deterrent.
You've got all these troops, American troops, British troops, that think they're fighting for their country, where what they're doing is fighting for that force which is destroying their country and is aimed to create a nightmare world for their kids and their grandkids.
Yeah, it's very clear to see that's exactly what's happening. It obviously takes you back. I remember you doing an interview probably around 2012 on Ride Pier with Luke Rudelsky talking about the Albert Pike, the 3 letters, and the Third World War being described as, the East against the West, which is what we're seeing. It's also, very clear to see that the Eastern alliances are being pushed closer and closer together. Just last week, North Korea and Russia have a summit, Russia and Vietnam have a summit. It's pushing all those countries closer together by trying to isolate them. So they are pushing into each other's arms. That's clearly what they're doing. They're building the fault lines. So as you say, one step back, Putin's just playing his bad cop, NATO good cop role, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, how long have I been saying that the global cult has no borders? The borders are for public consumption and public perception. The Chinese and the Russians are controlled, and the Eastern Bloc is controlled. This whole BRICS economic alliance based on China and Russia and involving Brazil and South Africa and many other countries now.
Yeah, India.
Yeah. That will be a form of centralized control. And so you've got this unifying force and unifying forces bringing the Eastern countries together. And, when you had the, quote, sanctions against Russia as a result of the Ukraine invasion, the whole outcome, the whole consequence, basically, of those sanctions was to harm the West.
Yep.
To harm the West in terms of energy and many other things. And what it did, because the Chinese just said, okay, well, what they don't buy, we'll have, right? So, and you're seeing it, you say this week with the Putin North Korea meeting, they're pushing them together. And at the same time, you're having more and more warmongering in the West through NATO and NATO countries. More and more kind of in different countries pushing towards conscription as well. And even in this country, you've got Sunak's conservative policy in this election saying 18-year-olds will have to serve in the army for a year or do community service of some kind. And you can see it's starting to move in a particular direction. But it's absolutely obvious that, as Farage is saying, that this whole invasion of by Russia of Ukraine was all part of the game.
Yeah.
All part of the game. I mean, if you look at the background to Ukraine and the coup that got rid of Yanukovych,
the Orange Revolution,
an elected leader. Well, first of all, there was the Orange Revolution. Then there was the more recent one where he fled to Russia. It was all orchestrated through the United States. So there's been a step-by-step totalitarian tiptoe towards this current situation. And where it goes from here, we'll see. But you can see where they want to go.
Yeah, I mean, not too long ago, there was documentaries on British television about the Azov Battalion and Nazification of areas of Ukraine. And now you dare mention that. That's a conspiracy theory. That didn't happen. But they admitted it very recently.
Well, you know, when you realize how it really works, that you've got the countries. This is why the alternative media is so focused on America. What's happening in America? They're gophers, mate. The real orchestration is happening here through these different countries. And when you get to that level, China is the United States, is Canada, is Europe, is Ukraine, is Russia. And when you understand that, the game starts to make sense. But what's happened with the so-called alternative media is that it's come down into the country level again. They talk about globalists, but it's basically country-centric. And that's never going to understand and uncover what's actually going on or understand what's going on.
No, it's not. Do you think psychologically with this, the reason there's been such a gap between the Second World War, then the Cold War that followed to now, is, you know, the whole philosophy that the vampire has to be invited in order to do. So that idea that they need public support in order to carry out certain things. Because the easiest time to have a conflict with Russia would have been in the immediate aftermath of the Berlin Wall and all of that, before that, and where there was the Cold War through the Kennedy administration and so on. But the fact there's been this delay of so long, no one alive today really knows what war's like. In terms of, you know, no one in the UK has had air raid sirens going on and big blackout curtains and all of that. Americans have never fought a war on home soil. So do you think that gap was done deliberately so that psychologically now, as you said, when people are warmongering, when people are talking about it, there's actually more appetite for it because people can't comprehend what that could actually look like? And psychologically, do they need that? Do they need people to go, yes, we support this?
The timing is all planned. They can't get it absolutely right all the time, but it's all planned. You know, they dropped the bombs on Japan after the Second World War, at the end of the Second World War, not because they had to. The situation that didn't require that in the situation that was there at the time. But what it did was show the world population the devastation of an atomic bomb.
Yeah.
And so that immediately led to this period of the Cold War where, and people are terrified of nuclear Armageddon. And that terror was more extreme because they had the vision of Japan, Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And you know, all these things are planned. And as I say, the foundation of human control, the entirety in the end of human control is based on controlling human perception. And so what they tend to do is they'll have a situation like COVID where everything's kind of pressured and people are in chaos and fear and what have you. Take Second World War. And then they'll have a period where people go,
yep.
And then you hit them again. And if you think about it, you know, if you are in a situation of intense pressure, then you don't like it, but you can come to terms with it. Okay, this is the situation. This is my lot. I've got to come to terms with this. But if you are then given hope that actually it's over, and then they hit you again, that's a spirit breaker, because you've been through that intensity, and you've been through that fear and worry, and then you get hit again. Yeah. And hope is always in the future, and it's a great form and source of manipulation. Give people hope. So we can't change things now, but hope that it will change in the future. But hope is also exploited as a spirit breaker.
Yeah.
Because once you've got hope, I hope it's over. I've got a situation now where it's not like lockdown, and it's not like masks and all that stuff. Oh, phew, that's over. Hit them again. And the effect on their spirit will be devastating compared with even if they were in a situation of intensity and having to come to terms with that.
Yeah, because you adapt to your surroundings, and that's a manipulation and psychologically torturing trick, is constantly move the goalposts. So you never know where you stand, you never adapt to it, you never get comfortable. You're just looking around, going, "What's happening? What's happening?"
Yeah, and also what's happening next? What's happening next?
Yeah, that fear. Yeah.
So what you've got with this Third World War thing, where they're ramping it up. Where it goes from here, we'll see. But what it is, it's another kind of what's going to happen next. What's going to happen next? And once you've got people in that state, you've got massive control of them, because if they think they're in anyone who thinks they're in a position of fear, they will look outside of themselves for someone to protect them from what they fear. Yep. The fact that those that they look to are those that have manipulated them into a state of fear is often missed, unfortunately.
Well, we have that now with this attack on the beach in Crimea that was clearly done with US involvement, or certainly US authorization. And you had the Foreign Minister of Russia, Lavrov, come out and say this isn't going to go unpunished. So what you just said there, what's happening next? Anyone is looking, going, well, what is going to happen next? They're going to respond in some way, but what does that look like? Is the energy grid going to go down? Is it going to be a cyber attack? Is there actually going to be a hot war attack? You don't know. So like you just said, that state of, I guess, immediate, I don't know what's coming from one day to the next. People are in that now.
Yeah, and it's all down to perception and manipulating perception, not least by manipulating emotion. And that's what you see all the time. And so much of the so-called alternative media misses all this. It just sees what it sees. It doesn't see the way that is used to manipulate perception. And understanding that is to understand the world.